World-famous bedtime stories from Mom. Today's story is Rapunzel. Once upon a time in a small village there lived a happy couple. The wife was soon to have a baby, and one day she suddenly had an intense craving for lettuce. "Oh, look at that fresh lettuce," she exclaimed, standing by the window and looking at the garden of the house next door. The neighbor's garden was filled with beautiful flowers and edible vegetables, among which the lettuce was particularly enticing. However, there was one problem. The owner of the next house was a very scary witch that no one dared to approach. "I really want to eat it. But it would be terrible if the witch caught me." Every day the wife stood by the window just looking at the lettuce. The husband, worried, said to her, "Don't worry, I'll find a way." But the desire for lettuce grew stronger. "Oh, I really want it. Please get me some lettuce." The wife felt hungry and her body seemed to be getting weaker. The husband, seeing his wife's desperate state, decided, "This won't do, I must get some lettuce somehow." One dusky evening, the husband mustered his courage and sneaked into the witch's garden. Moving stealthily, he looked around and finally got his hands on the most tempting head of lettuce. "I hope this makes my wife happy." Clutching the lettuce, he ran home. When the husband brought the lettuce, a bright smile spread across the wife's face. "I've never tasted such delicious lettuce," she exclaimed, taking a bite of the lettuce. However, the happiness was short-lived as her craving for lettuce grew even stronger the next day. "Can you get me a little more?" The wife's eyes were filled with a desperate longing for the lettuce. The wife's craving only grew. The husband, seeing his wife's face getting paler day by day, felt heartbroken. "This is bad. If it goes on like this, both the wife and the baby will be in danger. I have no choice, just one more time." He made up his mind. That night, the husband sneaked into the witch's garden again. This time he decided to take more lettuce. Climbing over the fence and into the garden, the husband carefully plucked several heads of lettuce. "Now my wife will be happy." Holding the lettuce to his chest, he quietly headed home. But at that moment, a terrifying voice suddenly came from behind. "How dare you steal from my garden? Let's see." The husband froze in place. Turning around, there stood the witch, eyes flashing, her face red with anger. The husband knelt down, trembling with fear. "Please forgive me. My wife is pregnant and she really wanted to eat lettuce, so I had no choice." His voice was shaking and his hands were trembling, humbly clasped in front of the witch. The witch stared at the husband for a moment, then suddenly lifted one corner of her mouth and said, "I'll forgive you, but you have to make me a promise." Kneeling before the terrifying witch, the husband listened to her words. "Please forgive me for the sake of our baby," the husband pleaded desperately. Then the witch set her condition. "All right, but when your wife gives birth to the baby, you must give the baby to me. If you do that, I'll give you this lettuce." The husband's eyes widened. "The baby? But..." The husband hesitated for a long time. But thinking of his wife's health and the well-being of the baby, he eventually had no choice but to accept the witch's demand. I promise. I will give the baby to you, witch." At that moment a smile spread across the witch's lips. Months passed and the wife gave birth to a healthy baby. The baby was the most adorable being in the world. The wife and husband were happy looking at the baby. However, their happiness was short-lived as the time for the promise had arrived. Now you haven't forgotten the promise, have you? One day the witch suddenly appeared and demanded the baby. The husband and wife's hearts were torn, but they could not break the promise with the witch. Thus the baby was handed over to the witch, who named her Rapunzel. Rapunzel grew up to be beautiful and smart. However, when Rapunzel turned 12, the witch decided to hide her from the world. The witch locked Rapunzel in a high tower. The tower was so high that no one could enter, and Rapunzel had to stay there alone. The tower had neither stairs nor a door, only Rapunzel's long hair hanging down from the tower's window. Her hair was long enough to wrap around the tower several times. The witch visited the tower every day and shouted, "Rapunzel, let down your hair." Rapunzel would then approach the window, untie her hair, and let it down for the witch to climb up. When the witch climbed up, Rapunzel always greeted her. "Mother, what good stories have you brought today?" Although Rapunzel was lonely, she always remained positive and cheerful. The witch, instead of answering Rapunzel's questions, always maintained a strict demeanor. "Stories? I don't have time to tell stories. You must stay here safely. The outside world is dangerous for you." However, Rapunzel could not hide her curiosity about the outside world. After the witch left, she murmured to herself, "What is beyond there? Someday I want to escape this tower and see everything for myself." A deep desire to experience freedom and see the world outside lived in her heart. Rapunzel expressed her dreams and hopes through her songs. Her singing filled the forest and her voice echoed far and wide. Although Rapunzel was trapped in the tower, her heart and dreams always flew freely. She knew that someday her dreams would come true. A prince wandering through the forest heard a beautiful song that captivated his ears. The sound silenced all other noises in the forest and made the prince stop in his tracks. Following the sound, he was led to a high and old tower. There, the song became clearer, and the prince saw a blonde girl singing from the top window of the tower. The prince returned to the tower every day to listen to her song. His heart gradually fell for her, and eventually he could not resist the desire to meet Rapunzel. He looked around the tower but saw no way to enter. Then one day he heard the witch shouting, "Rapunzel, let down your hair." The prince realized how he could climb up to the tower. The next day the prince gathered his courage and shouted, "Rapunzel, let down your hair." Although Rapunzel was startled by the voice of someone she had never heard before, her pure heart and curiosity led her. She let down her hair, and the prince climbed it to reach the tower. The meeting between the two was like magic. For the first time, Rapunzel saw someone else's face, and the prince was completely captivated by her beauty and purity. The prince confessed his love to her, and Rapunzel accepted his heart. However, they disliked the reality that Rapunzel was trapped in the tower. The prince devised a plan to rescue Rapunzel from the tower. He promised to visit her secretly every night, and they planned their escape together. "I will surely free you from this tower." "We can live freely together," the prince told her. Rapunzel gained strength from his words, and they began to dream of a happy future together. Thus, the prince and Rapunzel grew their love for each other, not losing hope even in the face of an impossible situation. Their love became a power that could overcome all obstacles. The love between the prince and Rapunzel deepened. They secretly met every night, making plans for their escape and sharing dreams of the future. However, not everything could go smoothly. The witch was clever and cunning, and she eventually discovered the secret of the two. One day, as usual, the witch climbed Rapunzel's hair to the tower. But her eyes were dark and cold. "Rapunzel, you have deceived me. How could you betray me by bringing a man from the outside world into the tower?" Trembling with fear, Rapunzel answered, "Please forgive me, mother. I just wanted to be with the person I love." However, the witch's heart was already hardened. She decided to punish Rapunzel coldly. The witch cut Rapunzel's golden hair and banished her to a deserted land where no one would find her. Rapunzel was left alone to fight for survival. She remembered the promise with the prince and vowed to survive somehow. Meanwhile, the witch planned to trap the prince. When the prince came to the tower again, the witch imitated Rapunzel's voice to lure him. "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." Overjoyed, the prince climbed up, but what awaited him was not his beloved Rapunzel, but the furious witch. The witch cursed the prince, saying mockingly, "I'll let you meet Rapunzel again," and pushed him from the tower. Unfortunately, the prince's eyes were pierced by thorns and he became blind. He was left alone in despair, having lost Rapunzel and his sight. But the power of love was strong. The blind prince wandered endlessly in search of Rapunzel. Rapunzel, too, kept her love for the prince deep in her heart, hoping to meet him again someday. After a long time, the blind prince wandered endlessly. The only consolation in his heart was the memory of his beloved Rapunzel. Hoping to hear her voice, he searched for her every day. Then one day he heard a beautiful song in the forest. It was Rapunzel's singing. The prince struggled towards the sound. Finally, he found Rapunzel in an abandoned garden. Recognizing the prince, Rapunzel ran to him and embraced him tightly. "My prince, you don't know how much I've missed you," Rapunzel said, crying. Her tears wet the prince's face, and miraculously his sight was restored. The prince could see again and, looking at Rapunzel's beautiful face, said, "Rapunzel, my love, you have opened my eyes again. We can now be happy together." They hugged each other tightly, making up for the lost time as much as they could. The prince and Rapunzel returned to the prince's kingdom to start a new life together. The people of the kingdom welcomed them joyously, and the love story of the prince and Rapunzel spread throughout the land. They were moved by Rapunzel's adventures and the prince's devoted love. The prince and Rapunzel became the most beloved couple in the kingdom, and their love deepened over time. Despite facing many difficulties, they overcame all trials together, understanding the true meaning of love. Their love story became a legend that would not be forgotten over time, delivering a message of love and hope to all. The prince and Rapunzel lived happily ever after. Thank you for listening to the end. Click on the playlist for more stories. Your subscription, likes, and notifications greatly support me.